Was anybody here last year, or how many people were here last year in terms of CommunicAsia, Broadcast Asia? So not that many, right? Some mix. Here's what I'd like to do. I want to report back to those that were here last year the things that we said and the progress that we've been making as IDA and as a larger team in Singapore. And for those that weren't, I'd like to outline a little bit about what we're working on. So last year at this event, we talked about what if we could try and think about analytics, think about performance, think about sensors in the same way that a Formula One car does. So for those that enjoy the night race or anything about Formula One, there's roughly 25,000 components in an F1. Most of those are censored in some way. So things around engine performance or brakes or anything else can be seen, can be dashboarded, can be understood. And through that, some decisions can be made to improve that performance. So part of our thinking last year was, well, what if we were to take that and to extend it to the whole nation? What if we were to think about Singapore as one giant dashboarded entity? And how would we want to think of that? And we talked about this notion of what if we were a smart nation? So there's lots of different cities around the world that are doing things in terms of trash collection when the bins are almost full instead of half empty and so on. So there's important things happening around the world. But our basic idea was there's nobody that's doing this at an entire country level where policy and people and technology can come together. So we said last year, well, what if we could be a smart nation? And we spent a lot of time thinking about that and working on that with universities and industry partners and research institutes and kind of meditating on what that might include. And so just to give you a snapshot, we're making some progress. So both President and PM have talked about what that would mean, what we would want to do, how we would aspire to be the world's first smart nation. And so analytics plays an important part in that. Thinking about that in the context of health and public safety and education, logistics, many different things that are affected by that. And then we really think about how to make some progress in that area, the Smart Nation platform. So in order to make this idea possible, we need to have a Smart Nation platform. And so that's basically how do we move data around? How do we think about capturing it, moving it, interpreting it? And from that perspective, the Smart Nation platform is really the backbone that allows a lot of this to be possible. We think about this in terms of already having 1 gig fiber to 95% of the island. And now what we've been thinking about is how do we have a wireless mesh across the island that allows us to have data sources from wherever in order to be able to make good decisions. How do we know what's happening in a drainage canal? How do we know what's happening on BKE? How do we know what's happening in any part of the island for the purpose of improving performance, public safety, education, some of the things that I spoke about a moment ago. Excuse me. So from that perspective, thinking about Smart Nation platform is really our first big objective, and we're working on that. But in order to do that, we know that we have to get things right, some really important things. And so for those that are interested in some of this space, you've seen some recent announcements from Minister Jakob, Minister of Communications and Information, just a couple of days ago around TV white space and the consultation that was taking place there and the effort to free up 180 megahertz of spectrum. So clawing back unused or underutilized broadcast spectrum in order to be able to use it in new ways, and thinking about dynamic spectrum access in order to free up space for other purposes. Now this is an interesting technology issue. How do we try and grab slices of spectrum and use them and then release them? And then there's obviously the policy issue. Who gets first rights? How do we avoid conflicts? Especially because we've got neighbors that we have to be sensitive to in terms of Indonesia and Malaysia and so on. So there's important things and we have to get that right. So the message here is there's a policy issue, there's a technology issue, and we want to make sure that we continue to work with many of you in the room on these ideas. Here's a couple of things that we're thinking about now. We know that we have to build companies. So part of our big goal is how can Singapore be a place in which leaders from around the world that have an interest and an idea want to come and help explore that, to build that. So we're working hard to make sure that we're a great place for tech product startups. And I was in London last week with a bunch of entrepreneurs at an event called Founders Forum, in which they're talking about how they can use technology in important areas, health and education and so on. And we're talking about how we can build bridges. And there were some UK-based entrepreneurs that were in Singapore earlier this week and still here today, talking about how they can explore some of their ideas here. So we want Singapore to be a great place for tech product startups. And we'd like to make sure that Singapore entrepreneurs that would like to go explore somewhere else, that we've got landing pads in San Francisco and London and Shanghai and elsewhere where we already have offices. So we're trying to think about how to help build companies. Here's one of the things that we're doing. IDA, through its investment arm, put money as an LP into a group called JFDI, some of you may know them, that are based up in Block 71. So that group is bringing in a cohort of startups from around Southeast Asia. We've got Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, lots of different countries represented, but they're based here. And so a lot of the innovation and exploration is taking place here, and that's what we're excited about. We've also got the commitment to partnerships. So together with friends such as Microsoft and Red Hat and Razer and others, we're working on a program called IPACT. We've also got a lot of exploration underway in Jurong Lake District. So for those that are seeing a little bit of what we're working on in the press, we're trying to test bed some things in JLD that will allow us to explore and experiment around this Smart Nation vision. And we've got an IPG program, which was announced by DPM a couple of months ago, in which we're trying to bring a significant amount of funds to the SME community for the purpose of helping improve the use of technology to drive productivity. So there's a range of tools and a range of partnerships, and all of those are important to us in different ways. And when we think about what we're doing here, we've got accreditation, which is we wanted to give Singapore-based tech product startups a chance to do work for government. So our goal was spend less time on issuing grants, spend less time on subsidies, and spend more time trying to help find real use cases, real work. So normally things around how many staff, how many references, how much working capital were all things that we had to think about before a company could be qualified to bid for a piece of work within government. And what we've tried to do is step into the middle of that and to say, how can IDA do some due diligence on these companies? Look at the founders, look at the code, look at the product. Is this something that would be helpful to some part of the government? And if it is, we accredit those companies, and they are now eligible for an opportunity to work with government in a way that they would not have been before. And so that accreditation effort, this is the team that's working on it, is alive and well, and it goes to work in July, so a few weeks. We've got a long list of companies that are already queuing up. We've spoken to more than a dozen that want to be going through this process when we're officially open. We've been sort of practicing and thinking about what it would include, and it's very transparent why they are or why they are not accredited, so that there's an opportunity to learn. Okay, we know that we need to build talent. We know that in order to do anything that we want to do in the future, we need more talent. A lot of engineering, but other areas are also important. To build a company, you need people that are skilled in financial structures, people that are skilled in building distribution channels, people that are skilled in building products, and so on. So many different types of talent. And we want to make sure that we're focusing on that, and here's a couple of quick things. Here's Minister Jacob, our minister, my minister, and when we take a look, a little robotics fun that we had at IDA Labs, in which one of the little primary students was helping move a robot around our labs, and just getting kids to be comfortable, interested, excited about tech. We've also got some classes here in which we're running a number of little robot building classes, robotics in cars at the labs. And we had about 80 or 85 kids there a couple of weeks ago building some of these different things. And again, it's not graded, it's not scored, it's not marked. It's basically, are you having fun? Are you learning something about the technology? What is it that you'd like to do? What can we help you do? Working with your friends. And so we've got a lot of these things underway. Coursera is a partner with whom we are starting work. For those that may know, Coursera was founded by a group that includes several Singaporean engineers that went to the Valley and are still there building a company. And so we are announcing that we are going to be working with Coursera to run MOOC sessions, some at the labs, and you'll say, well, if it's a MOOC, why do I need to come somewhere in person? And the answer is, we're saying part of the time, come spend time with us in person, because we want the community. We want to build a community. So it's not that you need an online course in a specific office. It's that we're going to be hosting it in 2 of our IDA lab locations because we want people to come together if they're interested in analytics. It's a structured program. There'll be more details soon. But essentially, the idea is come in, if you're interested in analytics, work with us, work with other like-minded people, because we know building more capabilities in analytics is critical for us, as you've already heard this morning and as you'll be hearing from others. So this is a program that we're going to be launching very soon. Our goal is to put a few hundred professionals through in our first effort. Whether that's exactly 150 or 200, we'll figure it out. But that sort of order of magnitude. And then we're going to run another one and another one. And we're looking to the industry to help us with this, to be both coaches and attendees. And the idea is we are going to work hard to make Singapore a great place for analytics professionals and analytics-related innovation. Okay, now I'd like to show you something. So like all great things, we're going to try a little bit of an experiment, so bear with me. Okay. So we practiced that a lot last night. And it worked out most of the time, not all of the time. And if you see a gentleman walking around that was my body double, and he has a mark across his cheek, please feel sorry for him, because those are, when you stand in front of a drone and it loses its center of gravity, it can be a bad thing, which is why I was standing to the side a little bit there. Here's why we're showing you this. Because we want to be able to build technology. So if we think about where this is going, this is, for those that are interested in Arduino, this is how we were trying to use Arduino at IDA Labs, when we were inviting kids and young interested professionals and so on. So this idea of having to use a blackboard to have a variety of sensors and connection points and so on, and we thought, well, that's taking a lot of the kids' time because they're focusing on this instead of focusing on some of the software and some of the other ideas about being creative. So the IDA Labs team, together with E3 in Singapore, built its own SGuino, as we're calling it. So it's our own version. It's a variant of Arduino, but it's our own version. And this is what we're trying to do, is we moved a lot of the things from the blackboard into the actual board itself, so that we've spent more time with the kids thinking about the programming and more time with the kids trying to make it easy to use. So the basic idea is, how can we get kids building this? So if you remember the earlier picture in which we had the classroom with about 80, 85 kids, and what we wanted them to do was to think about taking this and building this sort of a kit and putting it together and thinking about what's the audio sensor, what's the visual sensor, how do we think about these things in a way of just exploring and experimenting? And these are some of the examples that the kids were able to build. Now, part of the interest out of this is for the kids to know that it's something that someone cares about. So again, not marked, not scored, but someone cares about it. So for those that have been following it at all in the press, there's been a big ministerial forum in Singapore the first 2 days of this week, in which there was ministers, vice ministers, heads of delegations, which is why my voice is a little bit fried, from countries all around, not only Asia. We had representatives from Europe as well. We had representatives from Latin America as well. And so here's some of the kids that were able to present to a couple of the ministers. So for those that may or may not know, the Malaysian minister, we've got Estonian. So for those that are interested in tech, you know Estonia is very tech savvy. So they were able to take pictures with, have fun. The Deputy Prime Minister of Montenegro. We've got lots of different pictures here. We had Costa Rica, we had people from Japan, we had people from Indonesia. So we had a lot of these primary and secondary school kids that came in and said, here's what I've built. And they were excited to show it. The ministers were excited to receive it. And so the basic message was, Singapore is trying to think about how to be great at exploring and experimenting and building. So, as part of that, we want to bring tech on the move. We know that we cannot have everybody come to our labs, although we're excited about the fact that in the 2 months or so that they've been officially open, we've had 2,000 people through the labs. But we know that people cannot always come to us, so we're doing something else. Minister announced it yesterday. We're putting IDA Labs on a bus. So here's where we're also trying to be cool and clever in terms of creating opportunities. We're asking for ideas on how to retrofit the bus in terms of the optimum use of the interior space. We're trying to think about how to have interested kids, and I'm saying kids as in 18, 19, think about the metal fabrication or the welding or anything that goes into the interior fitting. So we could go pay a company to do that, but it would be cooler if we could have some young professionals that were interested in metal bending and some fabrication that would help us retrofit the bus. And the idea is we want to take the bus out, we want to go out to schools, we want to go out to the community, and we want to take things out that just says, have some fun. Here's the first thing we're focusing on, game sciences. So the picture of the kid with Connect, so our friends over at Microsoft. So we're thinking about Connect and how this idea of human and computer interface. How can Connect be a way of thinking about relating to something in a virtual way? And how does that have applications in health and all the other areas that we spoke about? So the bus will have different themes, and sometimes it'll be robotics, and sometimes it'll be wearables. For the beginning, it's going to be game sciences. We're going to roll around town. So I showed this slide last year when I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could have our own big, unifying, lunar landing type of theme, where we had to think about materials and propulsion and getting people to and from and guidance systems and all this cool stuff. And we said, what if that were to be sort of the smart nation type of thinking? So since then, we've been moving it on. I shared with you just a few of the points that I hope will give you some sense that it's real, that we are pushing it, that it's got the support of important leaders. And what we're trying to do now is have a call to action. Anybody in the room, or anybody that you know that's not in the room, that's interested in creating, building, experimenting, when we think about communications, when we think about data, when we think about security, when we think about anonymity, so anonymization engines, de-identification, so on and so on, moving data through sensors, how do we think of mesh networks, how do we think of governance? There's all these ideas that we are not pretending to have all the answers to by any means. So we'd like to work with everybody. Just please think about it this way. One smart nation, despite the fact that there are many cities around the world that claim to be a smart city, there's only one that has the opportunity for people, and processes, in terms of governance and technology. And we want Singapore to be a living lab for us to do some very cool things for citizens, and we want to think about all of these things together with you. So as I leave, please remember that we'd like to build Singapore. Okay? Thank you very much.